Hello, everybody. Glad you could join us for episode number 41 of the Launch and Beyond podcast, a podcast designed to support you in not only achieving great success in your business, but also in other areas of life as well. Irrespective of what business someone's involved in, there may come a time when the business may not be growing as it should. Obstacles, holdups, and handbrakes show up that prevent that business from developing and growing as it should. Some of these factors may be outside of your control, and you may need a strategy to identify and counter these specific challenges in order to keep moving forward. But some of these challenges or capacity constraints may be due to your own internal operations, systems, even your own specific mindset. Yep, that's right. The biggest obstacle and capacity constraint in your business may well be you. In this week's episode, titled Bottlenecks, Bureaucracy and Politics, we help you identify what the handbrake in the growth of your business may be and what you can do to change it. We hope you enjoy it. So Adam, we are back in studio, lockdown free as we are today, and for the first time in, three or so months.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Meeting personally, so good to see you. I've forgotten what you look like. Yeah. It hadn't been.
You're a lot taller than I remember.
I'm a lot taller. It doesn't come across as taller in Zoom. So, yeah. Mate, it's great to catch up with you again and to be in studio. And for people who've been listening through there, you'll notice the sound quality levels up quite a bit today because we're back being able to use all the equipment that we've been using for a long time. So
yeah, we're back into routine. I've forgotten a few little things, but it is what it is, and it's fun, and we're moving forward. And again, as we said, we're always going to take the curtain down and be as transparent as possible. But it was really fun while we were on Zoom for us to actually talk to new people, new guests, and have different voices on and share different wealths of knowledge. That was also a really fun time. So hopefully we can continue having guests in, and with our restrictions being lifted, hopefully we can have them in studio as well and get some good footage for YouTube and stuff.
No, sounds great. So Adam, we've got a topic today I think is going to be really relevant to a lot of people, particularly when they're looking to expand and grow their businesses. It's titled Bottlenecks, Bureaucracy and Politics. So before we start, is there anything that this topic brought up for you when you saw it?
Well, I thought you've been following the US race a little bit. So I was like, there's a lot of politics and bureaucracy happening at the moment.
Well, I'm going to put it within the context of work, right? Because you're right, there's politics, but specifically within this context, I'm talking within and it's probably, you know what, I didn't even realize that could be probably been the subconscious influence that came through. But I was really looking at the bureaucracy and the politics within organizations that stop them from growing.
Yeah.
Right. So that was really it.
And for everyone at home, we're recording this. It was an US election this past week, and we're recording on the Saturday after. Yeah. And votes still haven't counted. We still haven't got a president-elect.
Yep.
And we're just sitting here. So I thought when the topic came through, I was like, this is what it's about. I'm going to talk about Trump or Biden, or going to talk about Dan Andrews or whatever the other guy's name is. So
it was legitimate within the context of a work environment. So how about we get stuck into that today and specifically talk about some of the bottlenecks that show up. So, and by bottlenecks, what we mean, the classic example is when you picture a bottle, there's the part where it gets a lot narrower, and generally the flow is much slower than in the bigger part of the bottle. So that's used within the context of business. It's designed to be an example to say, hey, when things start slowing down. So there are quite often a lot of reasons why we look at bottlenecks, bureaucracy and politics, because they're different parts of a business that can be slowed down for different reasons. So when we look at bottlenecks, we identified 7 reasons why a business may be slowing down, may be not fulfilling its full potential and not allowing the full flow to progress and follow through. So like always, we mentioned to people, we've got these on show notes if you want to refer to them. So if you want to just sit back, relax, enjoy the in-flight service, so to speak, as they say on airplanes, do so knowing that you've got some notes in the background. But so of those 7 points, Adam, the first bottleneck that shows up for a lot of people is inefficient time management. And this is rife in entrepreneurial space where there are so many competing priorities. There's so many things that you've got to do that you don't allocate things accordingly the way that you should. So you start doing a lot in one direction, and then suddenly you've got to work around and go, I've allocated too much time here. I've got to do this back and forth. Have you ever had that example show up in your world?
Yeah, and that's the thing with wearing the multiple hats that we talk about. You've got so many jobs to do in one day. You can't sit down every single time and then go, yep, this is the perfect amount of time, and then that's the perfect amount for this task, and this is for this task. And then all of a sudden you get an email or a phone call that takes you off those tasks and go to a different task, and then all of a sudden your time management just got thrown out because someone chewed up 10 minutes or 5 minutes, or your mind slipped and you went into a different state, or you wanted to hit social media, or there's so many other variables that affect the time management that it just slows down everything, which I've seen way too many times, and I've felt it as well.
Yeah, and that's one that will definitely slow up or bottleneck your business or the growth, because you're not prioritizing and allocating time appropriately to what needs to be done. First, I guess, identifying the most important things and then allocating the most important time to do those. So as a solution to help inefficient time management, a really good thing to remember is, plan your work your plan. And the important thing about that is allocate specific tasks and roles. You would have heard us say many times throughout this podcast, what gets scheduled gets done. And having particular blocks of time that happens in is really, really helpful. And I guess the second part of that would be to apply the 80-20 rule, or the identifying the 20% of the actions that give you 80% of the results. So if you are going to be limited by time, this ensures that you get the most out of the things that give you the best metrics and best results. So that's something to consider in mind.
Yeah, I've been reading the 4-hour work week.
Yeah.
And also when I'm on my walks or runs, I'm listening to David Goggins' book. What was it? You Can't Hurt Me?
Yeah.
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 And both of them talk about this principle, and there's a point of no return, I believe Goggins said, or like there's a backstop.
Yep.
And basically what that means is, this is a task I've got to do, but let's just use time as the analogy. So I've got to do a task from 9 o'clock in the morning and finish by 10:30. And all right, I might be able to go 10 minutes over, but that's the furthest part. And you've got to know that at 10:30, wind up, go over to your next task. And I thought that was great, but he was scheduling, as you said, everything that gets scheduled gets done.
Yeah.
But one of the main things is, he goes, I don't have any social media. I post on Instagram twice a week. I don't follow anyone. I don't look at it. I just post to give motivation to others. And what he is doing there is eliminating distractions so that he can keep to that schedule. And that way he has become the most efficient time manager that he could possibly become. And I can see that I've adopted that more and more this week as I've been doing my runs and my routines, because I've got more reflection on that point.
Yeah, no, that's a good distinction and a good point too. So remember, bottleneck, I should say, number one is inefficient time management. So the second bottleneck that shows up for businesses is not having enough money or not being capitalized enough. And, most people would look at it and say, of course that's going to bottleneck you. But, so many times people get into business undercapitalized. And it's something that we celebrate in entrepreneurship. We go, yeah, great, this person started with $100 in their account, or borrowed the money off got started. And that's great. But most businesses, to get to a mature stage, need cash flow, steady, ready cash flow that you can keep investing back into your business. And if you don't have enough of that capital and working capital, it's going to hamper and slow down your growth. So what do you do in those scenarios? Other than having a huge jackpot coming along your way, there's some things you might do. You might look at it and be creative and say, okay, well, how can I collaborate with somebody else? How can I, if I don't have the resources, how can I, number two, be resourceful? So be creative in terms of what you can do. How can I grow my business by strategic alliances or collaborative events, or find ways that don't use a lot of money and need a lot of money to be able to leverage and expand on that.
And that's why one of the things about technology, dissing it in the first point, but bigging it up in the second point, is that you've got social media. And if you use that effectively, you don't really have to pay for advertisement. You don't have to pay to get your brand out there. And then what happens is, because you're out there so frequently, people start buying from you with little actual input from yourself into an advertising fund.
Yeah.
So there's a ways to get around it, but I've been caught here as well many times of not enough money. I'm like, I've got to. One of the things is I don't want to ever play a small game. I was outlining this last night to one of my cousins, and I was like, I'm happy to sell 5 or 10 boxes, but that's not where I want to be. I want to be selling 5 or 10 pallets.
Yep.
And to sell 5 or 10 pallets, you got to put money in. And sometimes that slows down. So you can't take a contract because you're like, I can't feasibly get that started.
Yep.
So then that hurts the business because you can't take on stuff all the time. So you bottleneck yourself.
Yeah. So cash flow management's a really important factor of any business. But at the end of the day, sometimes the reality is you might have to wait. And waiting quite often allows you to analyze that from the perspective of saying, okay, well, was I being reactive in that moment? Was the opportunity really the opportunity? And perhaps by waiting, you might come up with different pathways that encompass all that we talked about in there as well. So that's some solutions for that as well. Point number 3, Adam, and you touched on it earlier, was having too many distractions. Like if you're focused on every area that you could go to, or focus on things that take you off main task, it hampers and slows down your growth. So if you have a group that are relying on you to deliver outcomes or deliver tasks by a certain time, and you're distracted, and by virtue of that, you're not doing what you need to do, you're having an impact along the whole metric of your business in there as well too. So it's essential to eliminate these distractions, right? Now, if the distractions, if there's so many things that you've got to do, part of the reason why you become distracted in the first place is because you're just seeking an out. You're seeking a process. You may have too many things on your plate. So it's an important thing to just delegate and ask for support and help. And you'll find that when you're focusing on the 1, 2, 3 things that you do best and you can deliver on, and people can rely on you to do that, you'll find you'll be less affected by distractions because you just really focus on what you need to do, and then you get it done by that certain time. So I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, one of the best things I did was buy a whiteboard. I don't know. I'm sure you got a couple. Got a couple of rounds.
I've got one of these ones with it's a 4-part one.
Oh yeah,
it's like the old university school. When you see them in the movies when they pull the board down. I got one of those.
Oh, so there's hidden stuff and
so there's like why I find that helpful is if I got one board. And then I go, great, now I'll move it down to another company and I jot that down. I move it down to another company. So to me, it works really well because I can compartmentalize my thinking within a whiteboard structure.
Well, that's the same as me. I got one of the flip boards. So one side is one and then the other side is whatever I'm doing on the other side. Like, so if it's podcast related or if it's new business or book related, like I've got that on one side and then the main core bakery is on the other. But the best thing I did was I sectioned it up into days. And only 6 days because I never work Sundays. Everyone needs a break. But Mondays are orders and payroll get lodged. And then Tuesday, there's nothing really. Wednesday, there's, following up on orders with clients and all this stuff. Thursday is pretty chill. And Friday, I do all my payments and accounts. So I almost like schedule a day off in between from doing too many things. So that way, if I've got a new topic that needs to be done, that's when it's on the Tuesday or the Thursday. And that way I don't distract myself on the Monday where there's people want to get paid. And if I'm too distracted on Monday to pay my staff, they're not going to turn up to work on Tuesday. So
I was saying the army marches on the fullness of its stomach.
Yeah.
And people aren't going to be committed to the cause if you're not honouring the agreements and obligations that you have to them. So one of them is to pay them.
Yeah, and that's it. It's so simple. And again, on Friday, if you don't pay suppliers, stock's not coming in when you do your orders on Monday. So it's a whole cycle, but it gets written down. And then if any staff member has an order they got to put in, they just put it on the whiteboard for Monday. So Monday I come in, I look, done. And it takes almost no time. And it sped up everything. So now what used to take me sometimes an hour to get everything calibrated and all that takes me 5 or 10 minutes. So then I've reduced that distraction time down, and now I've laser pointed it, and it's sped up everything, which means I have more free time on Mondays. To edit the podcast.
No, that's all cool. So remember, if there are too many distractions, remember to keep the main thing, and that's really, really important. So focus on, coming back to point number one, identify those things that give you the best outcomes and results, and then surrender, let go, delegate the things that don't. And you'll find you're less likely to want to find distractions because you're focusing and you're being productive and you're getting reward for effort. So you go, this is good. Why don't I want to do more of that? So really cool. So point number 4 of why there may be bottlenecks in your business, and this is really from a perspective of understanding lead generation and pipeline flow and so forth, is that you may just not have enough relationships, collaborations, and a system and a process about generating new leads. And so a lot of the times people don't put enough attention to the attraction phase of their business. And the attraction phase of it can be meet and greet. It could be marketing, all those elements that give your business brand awareness, that open up relationships, open up discussions and possibilities. So any healthy business has a healthy lead flow. And there are different elements to that as well too. You've got to have a great basically a conversion and retention model and part of your business as well. But fundamentally, your bottlenecks will come if you're not getting enough people basically aware of what it is that you do and how you can focus on that. So some really key things that would help people in there is focusing on your lead generation, focusing on your distribution channels, and focusing on, who are the people most likely to be able to have influence over the people who are my ideal clients, and how can I communicate, connect with them so they have trust in me and refer people to me, if you've run a service-based type business, for example.
Yeah, and following on from a previous point that I made with this, exactly like the distribution, but I said I don't want to always do 5 boxes or 10 boxes. And the reason I don't want to do that is because I don't have that distribution chain. It's not big enough at the moment for me to just drop 5 boxes here or 10 boxes. It costs me more to do that than it does to distribute a pallet, funnily enough. So I'm not big enough at this time to go, oh yeah, we've got trucks on the road every time, we can just drop it off on our way through. And that's where a downfall comes in my business, because I can't pick up the small guys. It's not that I don't want to service everyone. It's just, it becomes way too expensive and unrealistic for me to do that. So one of the big things I ask now is, do you have a central distribution? And hopefully we're already supplying that distribution. So it's just adding extra boxes to that drop point, and then that distributor sends it out to all the customers, which makes my job a lot easier. It's not always about the money. It makes my job easier because I drop it off to that place and I know they've got 1 pallet there.
Yeah.
And as they're coming through, they got half a pallet, they reorder with me, so that we've always got that constant flow of product. And then end game is the customer's happy. And we don't have that bottleneck of people calling me every few hours going, where's my delivery? Where's my delivery? And I'm trying a new courier and I'm like, well, it's with the courier. What can I do?
Yeah.
So
this is actually, that's a really good point you raised, because I think it's going to expand and move on to our next point, which one of the bottlenecks that shows up for people, and you would think that, growing and growing quickly would be a great thing, but sometimes point number 5, growing too quickly for your current systems is actually going to create a bottleneck, because if your systems aren't built in advance to handle your process, it's actually going to hold things up. And as you said, you're chasing up couriers. You haven't got a mechanism by which one thing takes care of its other and it's systematized. It really shows up. We see that so many times where the scalability is affected because we don't have the process to grow into. And one of the things that we've always said, and every business that we've been involved in, is the metric we build things on is to say, if things doubled or tripled overnight, could your systems handle it? And if the answer is no, you got to be really careful, because you could be self-sabotaging your own success. And if your reputational damage that comes out of, hey, great product, great marketing, but it takes forever to that's actually going to be counter to what it is that you're trying to develop and grow. So it's really, really important that you put some focus in that area as well.
Yeah, like if people will go, yeah, great product, great service, but they're a real headache to deal with because we don't know when we're getting the product. And it adds unnecessary stress to other business owners. And that's what you want to alleviate. You want to get rid of people's stress. You want to make people come to your company because it's an ease. it's a pleasure to deal with these people. Oh, I always get the quality. Like I said this morning, like our cleaners come through on Friday night, clean everything. So when we start Monday, it's brand new, fresh, clean. This morning we were working, so I walked in and I'm like, how good is it? Like they come, they've got keys, they've got the alarm code, they clean when we're not there.
Yep.
We walk up in the morning, it's brand new, it's fresh, it's clean, and we're so happy. I go, it's the easiest company to deal with because I have no headaches, and that's how you should sort of be. Is you don't want to grow your systems too quickly and then become a burden on your customers, the people you're serving, because they don't want to come back every time.
I always I remember years ago when I was hiring a new accountant, and I remember being employed by. So I went to one accountant, and they said, "Look, based on what you want, this is the solution you're looking for." And I talked to them about, okay, listen, I want to organize trusts. I want to organize, and they go, "Look, you don't need it. Don't worry about it." And they say it's too costly for you right now. There's no point. And I went, okay, yeah, all right, I'll follow that advice because you're the professional. And then we exceeded what they expected us to do, and that ended up costing me 3 times the amount of what it would have been the case. So I then went to our next accountant and I said, listen, I need someone who's very proactive. I know where I'm going, and I want to build the process, the systems in place so that I can grow into. I don't mind paying more now if it means that I don't have to just turn the ship around 180 degrees and cost me time, effort, energy, and money. And so they built a system, and I know initially when we changed over, the accountant who we left was going, look, you don't need that. There's whatever, and within a short period of time, within a few years, we'd grown into that system. And if we'd stayed in our previous model, to then change, like if you can imagine, if you buy assets in one category and then you decide, oh, it doesn't work, I've got to change it to another one, it's massive. You might pay $2,000-3,000 more now to have an operating structure that's not right, but it's going to cost you 200 or 300,000 bucks to change direction. And that's the systems that we're talking about. That's in a financial capacity, but it's exactly what you just said too. You've got to have systems that will expand and allow you to grow into, but never to feel like you haven't got it covered.
Well, I'm starting a new venture with my cousin, and we're looking at a few different things. And I'm like, this is the price of the product. It's going to be $65 to $70 a bottle, right? And he's like, that's too much. Should be $40. I go, well, have you factored in this? He goes, but right now we're making it from our garage, pretty much. So I go, no. Because you're going to build a loyal customer base at $40. And then when you almost double that price, people are going to drop off, and you're going to invest so much more money. And then all of a sudden people aren't going to turn around and buy your product because you haven't built in that systems or the scalability. So I'm like, we need to set up. I go, I've set up a business wrong once.
Yeah.
Cost me $250,000. I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
I'm happy to pay the 10 grand right now and not worry about the $250,000 later on. So, once I laid it out like that, it's like, actually, that makes more sense.
Yeah. Changing direction is really hard. And so comes back to our previous point. You've got to have the money in place. And sometimes there's the old saying, being penny wise and pound stupid. It's different to go, hey, we don't have a lot of money, so how can we be resourceful and collaborate and all those things? But if you're not thinking several steps ahead to build your systems in there, to know where you're going, even if you don't have the money, when you do, if you then go, I regretted doing that, then it costs you a lot more anyway. So this is, those 2 points, if you marry them together, are going to really serve you a lot, and it's going to release some of those bottlenecks. And sometimes I always draw this analogy that if your impatience to do something comes into play, the analogy is you're on a basically a platform waiting for a train, and the discipline for a lot of times is waiting until you get on the right train, because if you just jump on the train for the sake of jumping on the train, hey, I want to get action, I want to get moving, you confuse progress and activity. And so you can get on a train that takes you in exactly the opposite direction, and then you've got to get off that train, get back on. The challenge is just waiting on the platform to go, nah, I'm going crazy waiting here. And then finally the right train turns up, you get on it and you go on your path. And that's where you add money and impatience, and it turns out really badly.
Yeah. And I posted a story yesterday on Instagram, and it was me panning across my factory.
That was great. That was a great story. I saw that one. I saw it with the new wrapping machine.
The new wrapping machine that we had to stop the podcast to get delivered. But we had all the pallet racks full, all the floor full, from production floor to the front garage door to the loading door. Everything was full. And I'm like, I think I need to upsize. And I got a lot of comments, and I'm like, yeah, well, now the renting market is for the renter. So that there's so many for lease signs, and I shouldn't be happy about that. But right now there's so many for lease signs at factories around my place. And I'm like, that's the one. I've picked one building, and it's a twin. So it's not that twin, it's that twin. And I pass it every single day. And I'm like, in a month, close to the end of the year, I'll actually go do the inspection and visit it, because I know once I got the Christmas trade done, I can look at growing to that next level. But I'm being patient. I'm not going there today, because if I go there today, I might overcommit myself before Christmas, and then...
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So that's kind of like building in your own double white line to go, okay, I need to manage me. I got to manage myself in the scenario. Well, you're going to love the next 2 points there, Adam. So the point number 6, which is one of the biggest bottlenecks for businesses particularly, is compliance. And it's really become relevant to me specifically. I've mentioned before, I've moved into a new industry as well too that involves a lot of compliance. So you need a lot of licenses, approvals, permits, registrations, all of that. You set up a business, it's all of that process. And you have to have an awareness around what's required, because if you jump in and commit, like you say, like so many times there's clients, coaching clients of mine go, right, I'm starting a new business, I'm ready to go. I go, hang on, I'm about to sign a lease. I go, no, hang on, wait. Have you done this, and this? Have you got your permits? Have you got your development applications in place? No, why do I need that? Oh, look, I just want to sign. I don't want to lose this property. I go, listen, if you don't do these kind of things, you'll sign a lease, but you can't operate a business from there. Sounds really basic, but unless you actually have the permission to operate from that place, you're actually in violation of your council laws. So they're going to shut you down. You're going to come with massive fines. So before you get into anything, you've got to understand what it involves to get to that first place, what it involves to stay registered, what it involves to keep your permits going, because, lo and behold, if you don't have your awareness around the obligations that you have, whether it's registration, whether it's permits, and those things lapse, they'll shut you down, right? And so many times you could have a great business building, but if you don't have the eye on the compliance, what allows you to keep operating from that perspective, that's going to slow down your business as well too. Imagine someone says, okay, well, you've got to shut down now, and it takes you 3 months to get that permit again. That's a massive bottleneck to your business. I mentioned practice because I see that a lot in health professionals that I coach. It costs them 3 months. I didn't get my registration done correctly. I missed that cutoff. Okay, well, there you go. There's 3 more months. 3 months, it becomes costly. Slows down everything.
And I'm starting up with my cousin. I'll be open about it. We want to start doing alcohol. So we both love whiskey, single malt. So we probably start single malt, but that takes years to age. So we probably start gin for the first 2, 3, 4 years. Because in Australia, technically or legally, I don't know, it needs to be in a barrel for 2 years before you call it whiskey. So that's a lot of outlay for just sitting and waiting for 2 years. Yeah. But before we even start one drop or one distillation or anything, we need to get a license. Yeah. Because it's illegal to distill liquor. Yeah. So the first thing I say to him is get a license. He's like, yeah, but we can try stuff on. I go, yep, get vodka. Yep. And we'll put a few botanicals in it, leave it for a couple of days, and then we taste the flavors. Yeah. That's how we're going to do that. And that's what we've been doing. We've been benchmarking and we've been doing our costings, but I go, nothing is coming from a still. Yeah. I don't care if it's just for us or our mates until we have a license, because I don't want to start this and then someone finds out and then we never have the ability to get a license. We're done. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. And yeah, all right, compliance, but you could get no compliance and then barred for life
Yeah.
because you blatantly broke the law.
Yeah.
So it's not just going, oh, I didn't have the kitchen permit for a month or a week or something. No, this is
Yeah.
literally breaking the law,
Yeah.
and they'll blacklist you.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, that's a great example because anytime, compliance is a big factor because anytime that every industry, actually every business that I'm involved in, there's a police check. There's a director's, what's the word? A director's statement to say that I haven't been bankrupted.
Yeah.
So you've got all these compliance issues along the way. So if you think that, okay, I'll cut corners to get through something faster, it actually may be slowing things down even further. And you're right, exactly like, yeah, I can't imagine the registration and the legislation around alcohol, food and drug, FDAs, they talk about all the time. The compliance that comes with that is massive. And I imagine alcohol will be exactly the same.
And the license isn't expensive. It's like
Yeah.
$500 a year
Yeah.
or 600. Like it's relatively cheap. It's like a kitchen registration,
Yeah.
so it's not breaking your pocket really.
Yeah.
But if you don't have it and someone finds out,
Yeah.
especially because it could be explosive. If you got naked flames next to alcohol, it could explode. It's combustible. So, yeah, it's
Yeah, no,
get my
great.
license. I'll do the school. I'll do a course if you want me to do it.
That's a really good point.
I'll comply to everything.
That's a really good point. So moving on from that, point number 7, this is probably going to be the most in-your-face type of reason for a bottleneck. The reality is it may be you. You may be the bottleneck to your business, to your growth, your capacity to grow, and specifically because you're getting in your own way. Like sometimes you over commit to what you should be doing and you don't delegate. Sometimes your view of the world may be too basically too pessimistic, or it could be too overly ambitious, and you're the person who's constantly overshooting, having to retrace. So it's really important to have a good level of emotional regulation to understand where you're coming from, but then also identify what your blind spots are, what your areas of capacity are that are holding your business back. And this is, in all the work that I do with people, a lot of times people come and say, okay, what do I need to do this and this? And they've got action steps. But the first metric I always look at is you. Like, because if you're something that's plugging everything up, what would happen if you release that? What would happen if you got rid of your blind spots or the things that are annoying people around you and are stopping them from being all in your business? So without doubt, the people who I find get the best outcomes and results, because the moment they do the work on themselves, they then get clearer on, well, my action steps, I thought they were going to be this, but they're actually going to be these now. So they can change. So doing for doing's sake is one metric, but if you get clear on yourself and your own limitations and your own blocks and clear those, you then are pretty much like a rocket ship ready to go, because you're not holding yourself back for your own fears, doubts, uncertainties, etc. Really important stuff.
Well, we were talking about this before we started recording, and you were saying that you're sort of more living in the moment, I guess, which the way I took it was that you're planning your stuff, but you're not overthinking it until you get there. And once you get there, you'll deal with it.
Yep.
So you're not the bottleneck because you're not thinking about it 24/7.
Yep.
You're not stressing out before it's even happened. You're not even over analyzing. You've always got to think of stuff before you go there. You got to have some type of plan, but you don't over plan and then change the plan and then no, scrap that plan. Let's get a new plan before you even go there, because you might not have needed any of these plans. You might turn up and go, hey, this is not as hard as I thought. Or sometimes it is harder and you go, all right, well, what's our plan now? And you live in that moment because it helps you be adaptive. Like today, I forgot a tripod, so we've stacked a camera on a couple of rolls of paper towels because I didn't see it happening, but we became adaptive and we didn't bottleneck it and go, oh, well, we can't record today because I forgot a tripod.
Yeah, look, that's a good example. And I guess to give it to context for people who may be listening specifically is I've made a decision to basically put the foot pedal to the accelerator, because the challenge for anybody who's got multiple competing priorities is to actually hold something in reserve, going, hey, I hope I'm okay. I hope things will show. I think I'll be able to handle what's going on, these demands coming my way. And what I realized was creeping into my world and was that I was holding back a little bit to energy preserve because I had so much going on. And I had, the whole 75 hard program, etc. That was really taking a lot out of me. And so what I did is I had to take stock of where I was. And so I made the decision to finish it was nearly like 180 odd days straight of twice a day training and all the rigidity of what was going with the training, and make it okay to drop it down to once a day training. And so, because what I realized was, man, how am I going to run 3 businesses and do this and do that? And that was the wrong metric. So for me, I had to just go, okay, how do I preserve self by being most energized? And by just dropping down to 1 session a day, my energy levels have gone up 20, 30%. So now I don't worry about holding back in the areas and ventures where I was. I can actually go into it with pedal to the metal and work it out as I'm going along. But still, I know where I'm going. I've got systems in place, but there's no idleness now. It's like, boom, we're going, and it's showtime. There's no holding back.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Gattaca?
I have a long time ago. I couldn't tell you anything about it,
Yeah.
but I have seen it.
Well, there's a bit of a spoiler, so just if you don't want to hear about Gattaca right now. Anyway, so it was about a time where people would genetically design their kids. So
It's come back to me. Yep.
Yeah, and then people would still have kids naturally, but they were called invalids because they weren't superior. These were the cleaners or, the garbage people. Like, they could never have office jobs. They could never move up in the world. Anyway, in one scene, there's an invalid and his brother is a valid. So he was genetically modified, and he what's his name? Anyway, what happened was they were racing each other, and this was a benchmark of how a valid could go against an invalid. And always the invalid would turn back because in his mind he was blocking himself, leaving some reserve. And then when they became adults, this invalid had to use his smarts to outsmart the valids to get through and move through life. And then in the last scene, a big spoiler. In the last scene, the invalid started swimming and swimming and swimming until the valid stopped swimming. And he goes, how are you doing this? And he goes, there's an island on the other side. I was swimming to the island. I didn't leave anything in the tank. I just kept going. And in the end, he saved his brother because his brother just couldn't swim anymore. But because he was a valid, he didn't want to accept that he had to stop.
Yep.
And it just shows you being smarter and not leaving much in the tank means that you're moving yourself and you're thinking out of it and just going forward.
So that was an awareness that I had myself, and used as an example from the movie. Principles are the same in that regard. So that's what I realized is, in that moment, I was a bottleneck for myself purely because I was tired. I was depleted. All my metrics, all my, I monitor my numbers and my data. I'm monitoring how much I'm sleeping, how much resting, and what was my heart rate variability measures were showing me that I wasn't replenishing, I wasn't recovering as well. And because the input-output harmony wasn't right. So I had to change a couple of things. And by doing so, that's just given me this another lease. So I've gone, great, okay, here's the energy that I was running on empty on for a while, that I was putting down to, okay, I'm being cautious, but it was actually just I was tired, I was exhausted. So that to me was a really big metric of what was bottlenecking.
Yeah.
So really, I brought that in for example. So the key thing here is, if you want to level up your own capacity, you might want to just acknowledge what's going on for you. As I talked about in my own personal example there, you may want to delegate and let go of some things that aren't necessarily essential that you do. That's going to help you out as well. You might consider getting someone to be your eyes and ears and identify the blind spots by way of an accountability person or a coach who could keep you accountable to not only just doing more, but ensuring that you've got your whole wits about you and you're not cooking yourself because you're running blindly on one metric but forgetting others. And importantly, just getting out of your own way. I think that's a really big, key, important component to remember when you're dealing with stuff about yourself.
Well,
Right.
one of the things I say in business is everyone's replaceable, including me. So
Yeah.
I go, what's the best for the business, not what's best for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is my business, but what's the best move? Because for instance, if I go big and I get a board and they need to replace me one day, what's the best for the business? Because it is my business and I still want it to move forward. So I remove myself from most decision making and I go clinically, financially, numbers wise, what is best for the business?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's how I run everything now is take a step back. If I wasn't in this company, how would someone else run it? Or how would a big corporation run this part of the business?
And that's a good point, because the first part of these three things we're talking about today, the bottlenecks, are really geared towards more startup growth kind of companies. And so they're going to things that are going to stop you growing. The next part we're going to talk about is bureaucracy and eventually politics. Now that's going to show up more when your company's more developed, bigger. There are more people, there are more moving parts. And like you just said, Adam, when there may be a board. And this is where it all comes into it. So while bureaucracy is more relevant the bigger the organization is, there's some key learnings that people in small business can be aware of to ensure that they build in measures to avoid, right? So, so the second part of this, the bureaucracy I talked about, I just want to read something that I came across just during the week that I thought was really fascinating, which highlights bureaucracy and why it's important to identify. And that is the Harvard Business Review. It conducted a massive survey, it was like 700 readers on bureaucracy. So back in 2007, here's what they found. They call it bureaucratic drag. And that is, bureaucratic drag slows down, wastes time, stifles innovation, and causes employees to focus too much on internal matters rather than the customers or what it is that they should be delivering on. And so while, as I said, it's mainly the larger organizations, it applies to small businesses as well. So the things that they identified was really the most important parts were it slows down work activities and decision making. So if you've got too many people involved in a process, you've got too many inputs, potentially it slows down your ability to progress and move forward. A lot of the people who responded to the questionnaire said things like paperwork and meetings are often, and times that took to get approval, were the biggest bottlenecks that slowed things down at a bigger sort of a company. So why that's important for people to be aware of, as I said, is because as you're growing, it's really important to cut out as many of the friction points in your business so that as you get bigger and you get more complexity, they're just not a multiplier effect. All right. So hugely, hugely important. I've got some solutions for there, but is there anything you wanted to add there, Adam, before we come up with some solutions for the bureaucracy?
No, I'm thinking, like, I'm in two minds about this, but one, I was just looking at, again, another movie reference. Let's get them all out there. Have you ever seen the movie The Intern
Yes.
with Anne Hathaway and Robert
Yes.
De Niro?
Yep.
And you see how they rapidly grew within 1.5 years from someone at home, a housewife in essence, developing a clothing line. Then it went to having 200 or 300 employees. And then the idea was moving away because there was too many moving parts. And she ordered something to her house and she got the box and the wrapping was all wrong. And she went crazy. So she went back to the factory where they ship out everything, and she folded everything and go, this is how we do it here. And one of the things is she was so customer driven that she didn't care about what was happening in the office. Whoever was packing this had to pack it as if it was someone's first package from this company. And then they get that first feeling of opening the box and the wrapping paper was beautiful. And the note was beautiful. And they unwrap it and it's their right dress or their right t-shirt or whatever they ordered. And she focused about the product. And when you get to a bureaucracy and there's so many moving parts, as you mentioned, you forget about the customer. And the customer is your income. Without the customer, we don't do anything. customer, consumer, whatever industry you're in. If you're, service based, or if you're in a product base, you've always got to remember the customer does come first. So it does hurt me when I said earlier, I don't want to supply the 5 or 10 boxes because I want to supply everyone, but I can't service them properly.
Yep.
So I'd rather not do it than service them in a negative way.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I was talking to Sal Frazella when we had him on. I want the vegan protein to come over, but not many people order it here.
Yep.
And so he goes, we're not going to send it over because there's so many like paperwork that they have to fill out if it's not going to be serviced properly.
Yeah.
So I understand it. So I go, yeah, all right. Well, I guess I'll wait till, there's bigger demand and just keep lodging more demand papers over there. But that's how they grew so rapidly as well. In 10 years, they went from, he outlined in the story that they went from a garage to now making $300 million per annum, even in a, global pandemic.
Yeah.
So they remember that it's always customer first and forget about the bureaucracy.
Yeah, look, it is really, really an important component to remember. And I think what's going to happen, and I guess I'll highlight it with some action steps to that from this that'll help. But as we start going back into society, what a lot of strategic companies are doing it, and I've noticed the airlines are doing it. I've been astutely following what it is that people are doing, is they're eliminating friction points in their previous business model. So, for example, like checking in with airlines, they've now said, look, we're cutting out service desks, right? So they're doing, what's going to happen is that they're going to say, okay, well, we now don't have service desks under the guise of, okay, COVID, and we're following all those guidelines. But what will happen is they don't need a service desk, so they don't need less employees. So what will happen is the customer experience, they're hoping to go, okay, there's contactless solutions. There's so many points where, yes, they're doing it for safety. Yes, they're doing it possibly costs, but they're the kind of things that the bureaucracy process, we may have just built a company that's always done it this way, and only until something like a pandemic comes along, we never examine our systems to work out, well, is there a better way to do this?
Yeah.
And this has kind of been forced on people as well. So it just shows up more. Like if you've got a little problem when it's a smaller company, you'll probably get through it. You'll be okay. Nothing will show up. But if you ramp it up, suddenly that little problem becomes a massive one that impacts on, as you said, quality assurance. It impacts on delivery times. It impacts on so many things. So being aware of all those along the way is really important.
I remember one of my mentors said, and when they were explaining it to me, I laughed. And they're like, oh, I can get this container for 2 cents cheaper. I'm like, yeah, what's 2 cents? We don't even have a 2-cent coin. 2 cents isn't money. And then he goes, ramp that up by 20,000 units and see how much money that is. What's that? 2 cents by 20,000 is what? $400? Yeah, $400. So you're losing $400. That could buy you more packaging. And then you go, oh, all right, yeah. I use 20,000 of those, and then it doesn't sound like such a laughable thing anymore. No. So
no, it's important. So bureaucracy is really important, and some ways you can avoid allowing bureaucracy to creep into your business organization, particularly as it grows bigger, is being aware of how many layers of approval are necessary for something to happen. So if you've got marketing, IT, accounting divisions within your organization, can 2 of those sign off on something rather than everyone having to go through? If you've got a committee meeting that has to happen, does everybody have to be there? It's like if you've got 16 people, do you really need everybody there who contributes to it, or the decision makers, the most important people to be on there? And how do you delegate to ensure that stuff gets done? So this is really, really important. I know particularly in the innovation space and room, they always say, you should never have more than the number of people that it would take to get through 2 pizzas, right? So usually say 4 to 6 people within a committee that's more dynamic. The more you have, I can knock off one by myself.
I was going to say, we'd have the 2 pizzas ourselves.
All right, but normal people, right? Normal people. But effectively what that will be is just showing you that becomes the bureaucracy of having too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen,
Yeah.
right? Slows down. Everybody's got their input as opposed to moving it forward. So is your input essential? Can you do it in advance? And let's speed up the decision-making process.
Well, that's what I was saying to my cousin, because we made a certain recipe with our batch, and we were sharing it around, but I'm not drinking it at the moment. Like, I'm smelling it, and I'm like, that's really good. I really like that batch. And then he went around to 12 different people, and he got 12 different opinions. And I go, but were you happy with it? Because that's our product, and if we're going to do this, that's the main thing. If you give everyone an opinion, everyone's going to find something different because they want to feel new, they want to feel valid. So it's the same as when you're running in a bureaucracy. How many people does it come in? That's where meetings blow out to 2-3 hours because everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to have an opinion. Whereas we've talked about this before, when everyone drops their opinion into a box, you filter through, and then one person comes through in the meeting and goes, hey, this is the voice of the company.
Yep.
What are we going to do? And as you said, there's only 2 pizzas in the middle, and those 5 or 6 people decide what 20 people put together for the meeting. So it accelerates the process a lot.
It does. So those are some solutions for your business if you find that bureaucracy is playing a part that may be slowing it down. The third part of this podcast that we talked about politics, and this is where you might have thought I was going to lead into the US presidential campaign, Adam. That wasn't the intention, but it may have suddenly come through as a result of that.
I was going to say that, maybe we needed a few more multiple people looking over all the ballots that were happening over there. But
I'm just going to let that one go through.
It's early days at the moment.
It's the most contentious topic in the world right now. So, but we're not talking about politics. I'm talking about.
Look at him, a true professional. Just keep talking and move on.
I can talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles when I need to. In terms of politics, I'm talking about office politics.
Yeah.
And particularly, as we said, as things get bigger and bigger, right? So imagine you've got a company, you've grown to 100 people, 200 people, and you start getting divisions within your company by virtue of the politics. And politics will slow down your growth in your company for quite a few reasons. One of them is it's a productivity killer, right? So if people are engaged in politics, they're bickering, they're talking about this and this and this, they're not focused on what it is that you should be doing. And there's an inordinate amount of energy and effort and time going into politics as opposed to what are we here to do? So I know for us, every time we've, and this is where good leadership comes into it, I think it's really important, is if the leadership's strong and it's approachable and you give people an opportunity to communicate what they need to say, they don't then go off and need to recruit other allies in their party, right? We've always said, okay, listen, if there's any issue, you need to come to us first, and ensuring that we're approachable enough that we hear things good or bad. Because if you've got a leader who doesn't want to hear it, you're going to create politics in your organization. But if you're open to, and sometimes you got to go, oh, I'm the person who's creating all this stress, and them to be able to come in and address that to you, you're not going to create these divisions.
Yeah.
So I think this is the part where we talk about that sometimes it's you, because you're the one who's generating the politics by virtue of you there saying everybody else's problem, not my problem, and not taking ownership.
Yeah, so I've worked in multiple companies, all in the food industry, but I've seen different politics in offices. And there's one company that I work for, I love, Mission Foods. Close to no office politics. There's always the personality differences, but it doesn't come from roles. It's just people. That's people. That's what we live with. But what I normally deal with is we design or help cook food and develop the menus, and then we pass it on to the sales team, so that the sales team can go out to the chefs or the cafes and go, hey, our private chefs have taught us this, and they show people. But then sometimes it goes out of that range. How do we get that word out bigger? Do we go to the sales team? No, they go, hey, talk to the marketing team, because then they can develop a program. But in other companies I've worked with, I don't want to name them because this is a negative one, when you go there, you pitch into the sales team, but then the marketing team feels left out. So they come in and go, hey, show us this. And they don't come in with the company ethos, because the sales guys know the story, the origins, how to sell it to someone. Marketing should, but in this company, they don't. So what they do is they come over, oh, this is what's on trend. Yeah, but you're not keeping consistent with our story and our mission. So that's where Mission Foods, they come. They're a family-owned business. 70 years ago, they were in Mexico, and they moved through, and they keep that through all their marketing, which is amazing. And they've got the Mission Bell, and that's their logo. And you see that on football players. You see it at Formula One, and they've got 100 different facilities around the world that have the exact same core values, and they have the exact same hierarchy. Doesn't matter if I'm in China, Malaysia, Spain, or Australia. They all run very similarly. But whereas the other company I've seen, they don't run like that. And there's always bickering. Oh, I don't know how that person got to this role. I don't know how that person got there. Oh, they can't even tie their shoelace. And you're just like,
Yeah.
hey, what does that matter? They're in the role. Rather than bicker about it, let's go, how do we enhance this? How do I move up? Or how do we come together as a team and move forward?
Yeah. And that's it's important that you highlight that, because most times people are posturing for a position. It's self-preservation, looking after their own turf. So they're going to withhold. They're going to withhold information that's not necessarily in the best interests of the company or somebody else, because they're worrying about their strategy, their process. This is where politics comes into it. And, as a culture, that's going to be quite a toxic environment, which you've already outlined, right? As a result of that, you're going to have more people go, I don't want to be a part of this, so I'm going to go. So you'll find that you tend to have turnover that's much higher in those kind of environments. And then what comes with high turnover is high cost, less productivity, all those kind of environments.
A lot more training involved.
A lot more training. Yeah. So rather than focusing on doing what you want to be doing, you've got to keep hitting pause to go, okay, let's onboard some new people. Let's train them up to get to the point. And this is the whole point, is if you're not looking at the politics that's created by sometimes you, by virtue of your action or inaction, you're going to create an environment where that basically propagates this and generates all these type of situations and problems that ultimately hold back your company.
Well, that's why I love working with the Mission Foods, because every time we got a meeting or a phone dialing or something, we schedule it. It's scheduled for 15 minutes. We're finished within 5 minutes because we just power through the work. And we're not there to dilly-dally. That's where the time management we were talking about in point one. That's how we know that we're not slowing down. Whereas in other companies, you have a meeting, it's set for an hour and a half, on the phone as well. So you sit there, how's your dog today? Did they put on their little sweater? And I was like, I don't care about dog clothes. And not to be disrespectful, but right now we've got a scheduled meeting. If we want to talk afterwards, more than happy to do it.
No, let's get lasered in. So Adam, there's 3 points that will probably really help you if politics are playing a part in your business and potentially impacting on its capacity to grow. Is number one, you need to set the tone and standard of the culture in your organization. If you are the business owner, if you're the person in charge, you set the tone of what is happening in the organization. And if you're not living up to what good leadership should be, you're going to invite politics by virtue of that as well. So it's really important that you look at yourself. Number two, you raise the standard and expectation of behavior, not only in yourself, but in your team. And so this is where you sometimes need to call it out and go, hey, listen, this kind of stuff will not be tolerated, not in a draconian dictator type of way, but with confidence and assertiveness to go, hey, this isn't the environment where this kind of action will be rewarded. So if you're posturing, and it's really important in terms of how people ascend to the organization, if people are seeing that you are sucking up or you're politicking your way through, and that as a leader, you're not calling that out, that's just going to keep happening. Right? It happens so many times in organization. And a really good reference would be, we've talked about this one in our earlier on podcasts about above the line, below the line, is adopting an environment and a culture of being above the line. And above the line, we talk about things like being accountable, being transparent, being having an intensity, honesty, those kind of principles, and not shirking responsibilities. Is just leveling up and stepping up, basically.
Yeah, and just responsibility, I think, and I love the first one, set the tone and the standard for the culture, and I'm sure we've said it many times, but you're the product of what you tolerate,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
your life is the product of what you
Yep.
tolerate, or your business is the product of what you tolerate, and the more you tolerate, the the more negative it becomes, and I don't know why it is. It always defaults to negative because it seems like the harder things are in life. I don't know how to say this. I've
Yeah.
just lost it. No. But the harder things in life are the ones that end up more positive, I believe. Because it's like a diamond, I guess. You put it under way more pressure.
Mm.
It's really hard, and then at the end you crack it, and then there's a beautiful diamond in the center. So the things, that's what 75 hard has taught me doing multiple times, is the more pressure I put on myself, the more I find I can get out of myself. Doesn't mean I want to live in that zone all the time, but it means that I set a tone for how I want to react, or my body to react to situations. And yeah, all right, when I'm running, my foot could be a little bit sore, or my knee could be a little bit sore, but I'll keep moving through that because I know the ultimate goal.
Mm.
So if I tolerated, my knee being sore, I'll take the day off today,
Mm.
and I'll take the day off the next day. And yeah, I'll wait for it to heal properly. Then the tone is laziness,
Mm.
which is a negative aspect. But if I go, oh, my knee's a bit sore today, I'll just run through it. As long as it's not falling off from the bone, I'm going to keep moving through. It's happened. Don't laugh.
No, I'm not laughing at it. It's more. I've just had he said you were listening. You're going through Dave Goggins' book. I'm laughing because I remember reading that book where he's running a marathon on a broken leg, and I just had this vision of body parts falling off, and he would still keep going. That's what
Yeah.
I was laughing at. So yeah, that was really, and that made me look at myself and go, "Gee, man, like, wow, okay, are you dogging it because you're not feeling like doing it? Not so
Yeah.
much, but yeah. So that was what I was giggling about. Yeah.
Well, that's like going to jiu-jitsu again. Is sometimes you hit someone with an accidental elbow, and everyone stops all of a sudden. And I was always under the mentality that as long as I'm not pissing out blood somewhere, keep going. You're always going to get a cut or a nick, or sometimes if you get a dislocated toe, you just stop. Hey, let me just pop this back in, put a tape on, and we'll keep going. But you're setting the tone and you're setting the culture for your club, and that's why I love training at 10th Planet, because the culture in that club was set that we do the hard things, but everyone gets respect now all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that came away. I had a point, but couldn't articulate
No,
it right on that one.
you've communicated it through your own personal experience and
Yeah.
story, and a lot of times that's what it will help someone understand the point where they go, okay, give me an example of what that is, and you've outlined that, so that's really helpful. Adam, I wanted to summarize the body of what we spoke about today for people. We basically say the three key areas that we talked about that quite often may slow down the growth or your capacity to grow your business are: number one, bottlenecks specifically; number two, bureaucracy; and number three, politics. And of those three things, bottlenecks you'll generally find earlier in the entrepreneurial and business journey. So you'll notice that when you're, short of time, your money, how you allocate your resources, those kind of things. And what can you do that can move the process and keep the process moving forward when you've got restrictions or limitations in resources, time, effort, money, those kind of things. Point number two, with bureaucracy, when they're looking at systems, we're looking at ways of going, how do we decrease the friction? How do we decrease the stress? How do we decrease the things that slow things down in the way we go about our systems? So that's a really important consideration. And you'll find that these will show up more as your business will grow, as it gets more complex, has more moving parts, incorporates more people. So that's really, really important. And the third part of what slows businesses down is really the politics. And potentially you're dealing with people issues. You're looking at, okay, what are the human capacity constraints within the business organization? What level of emotional intelligence is required here? How do we manage people? How do we lead people? How do we empower people? And how do we show people the way that the culture of the organization is and needs to be in order to move forward? So there's some key components in there as well. as we start winding down, we'd love to leave people with some action steps that could actually, if they so choose to use them, to get the most out of the information we have. There's 3 of them. First action step would be to, if you are noticing that there are potential challenges within your business, identify, number 1, where your potential capacity constraints are. Are they at the bottlenecks stage, at the start of the process? Are they related specifically to bureaucratic or systems issues that could be improved that would make the difference? Number 3, are they political? Are they people-related issues that you need to put attention to assist you, to help you to move forward? The second action step, if it is one of those, what is the main cause or reason for that happening? So you might have identified that, okay, the issue is a bottleneck issue, we don't have enough money. Okay, that's the important consideration to have. So the third part of it would be, what are 2 or 3 things that you could do that would help you to work around that issue and problem? So in that scenario, like we mentioned earlier, it may be to collaborate. It may to be to resourceful. It may be just to wait.
Yep.
So at every one of those points that we've covered along the way, awareness of exactly where you're at is going to really help you. And point number 2 is, once you're aware of it, what are 2 or 3 things that you can do proactively and positively that will help you move forward? So anything you wanted to add with regard to what we covered today, Adam?
Not really. I find that what you must do is do a lot of deep diving in yourself first. And that's I think the underlying tone to our whole podcast is that you need to know who you are and know your capabilities before you step in, because one of the biggest contributors of bottlenecking, as you said in point 7, was you. So if you don't know who you are, you can't sit there objectively and go, hey, maybe I am the one hurting the business. It's always someone else's problem. You know, you always point the finger. It was this person, that person. They didn't do the orders. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. And it becomes a blame game. So starting the blame game as well leads to the bureaucracies, which leads to the politics. The more people blame each other, the more politics comes up and goes, hey, why do I want to work for this guy? Because I always get the blame, even though if it's not my fault. And you I don't know, you set a negative culture into your business. So I believe before, like, this is a checklist. Once you know who you are and your direction of your business, start checking off what is holding up the business now, or what potentially could hold up your business. Yeah. So I find that, just work on yourself constantly. Just constantly work on yourself. Yeah, that's a great way to cap everything that we've covered in there. So it was absolutely fantastic to be able to see you live in the flesh again and have our personal interaction rather than over through Zoom. So thank you for joining me on this podcast again, episode number 41. And also want to thank everybody else for joining us in this podcast as well. The feedback we've been getting has been fantastic. We are grateful for every bit of feedback that you can give us about the podcast. We're aiming to deliver value to you. Your comments and information is always something that we take on board. So really thank you for everybody for doing that. Just a reminder that if you'd like to connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and the extended Launch and Beyond community, you could do so through these channels. If you've got any questions or comments you have about the podcast or anything you'd like any support with, please reach out. Quite often the information that you have that you share with us on one-on-one would be great to have on a public forum. So we'll definitely encourage that and be more proactive in that, but please feel free to post in our forum so that other people can benefit from your questions as well. And if you are enjoying the podcast and finding value in it, we'd be grateful if you go over to iTunes and leave us a review. That allows us to expand our audience and reach more people. So for me, thank you for joining us once again. Look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks, guys.